All right, so I am very happy to introduce Betsy Sneller. So she's an assistant professor at Michigan State University, where she co-directs the MSU Sociolinguistics Lab. Her work there focuses on understanding phonological variation and change, which is, of course, inevitably shaped by social factors like where we live, who we hang out with, how we identify as a person. She was recently awarded the prestigious NSF Career Award. Congratulations. Yeah. And she devised and leads the MI Diaries project at Michigan, which is primarily what we'll talk about today. And I also recently learned that Betsy and I share a superpower, which is the ability to repeatedly lose very important objects, such as our phone, wallet, and passport, and then recover them with like zero negative repercussions whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Also,
literally like,
I don't know where my phone is, but I have the same phone case.
this is why I'm pretty sure.
I'm thinking it's gross. So anyway,
With that, I will let Betsy take it away.
thank you.
You all warmed up?
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and to the folks that I got to talk to yesterday and also today. Really nice conversation, so I appreciate, it's been a really nice visit so far. So yeah, today I'm talking about the Michigan Diaries project and the research framework more generally. So this is a talk in 3 parts, and part 1 I'm going to be telling you like what it is, and just so that you have like my end game in mind, this talk is an advertisement. I'm telling you about a product, and I want you to like use it so that I can make it better. Okay, or maybe you can make it better. I don't know. Okay, but I'm going to step back real quick before I get to the advertisement part to give a little bit of the like background of the Michigan Diaries project by telling you or back to a moment in time that might be familiar to many of you.
I'm glad that it kind of hit me gradually, but I think I was really shocked when I went to Costco and the parking lot was filled, like there was no spot to park. Like you had to wait for a car to back off to get in. And then when I pulled in and got out, there were people and all they had in their cars was toilet paper. And I was in just
You're familiar.
like, what is going on? And then I went in the store, and there was like maybe 2 carts available. And I looked, and this is like 15 minutes after the store opened. And I looked to the back of the store, and the line to check out was snaking around the store, and I just dropped the cart. You know, just on out of here. This is awful. That was the first time I realized this is bad.
Okay, this is a diary entry from one of our participants at the very, very beginning of the project. It was really, as soon as the pandemic hit, there were lockdowns in Michigan, like many other places, and I had just gotten a job offer from Michigan State, and I do sociolinguistic research, which happens face-to-face. Okay, so this is a problem for me because I'm about to start a new job and I can't collect my data. What ended up happening is that together, you know what? I'm not going to say that just yet. Here's why sociolinguistic research is done face-to-face. This is a little picture from my actual field notes when I was doing ethnography in Philadelphia. The B is me, and everybody else is a group of teenage hoodlums who stole a wheelchair. We do sociolinguistic research face-to-face because it gives us a better sense of the richness of people's lives, right? I am actually not just interested in how you talk. I'm interested in how your social context impacts how you talk and how you see yourself in relation to your social world. In-person research lets me do that a little bit better because I can see you in your context and how you relate to the people and the world around you. I also can obtain high-quality acoustic data. Canonically, this was done with, the actual details of this change as time goes on, but I was using a Zoom H4n recorder. Nice data. And face-to-face research lets me interact with participants. It lets me ask follow-up questions. It lets them talk to me like I'm their friend. This is super valuable for a couple reasons. We want naturalistic speech. We want to know how people actually are talking. And when they talk to me like they're my friend, it's a little bit more vernacular, which means it's more systematic, which means it can tell us more things about how language changes. Okay, but the pandemic hit, and now I can't do in-person research. So instead, I got together with my new colleague at Michigan State, Suzanne Wagner, and we developed what we called the Michigan Diaries Project. This was originally called the Michigan COVID Diaries because what I thought would happen was we would maybe get 50 people, maybe, to like tell us how COVID impacted their life. We developed a smartphone app for iOS and Android. We were relieved to see subsequent research showing that like native recording in a smartphone is quite good for acoustic analysis, especially if what you analyze is vowels, which is what I analyze. It's a little shakier for things like fricatives that you have to have, but it's great for many things. So here's a little screenshot of what our app looks like. It's very simple. It's a recording app. It sends the data back to our servers. But it was important for us to have an official app in the App Store because we wanted data from kids as well, and to convince strangers that you can't speak to in person to let us have recordings of your children. Anything that you can do to make yourself more credible helps. And then because I want to analyze language change over time, I need a lot of data. I need at least some amount, which we've sort of arbitrarily set to 15 minutes because it turns out like a 6-year-old can't talk straight at you for like longer than 15 minutes. Subsequent improvements to the app included gamification to help kids reach this 15-minute recording goal. It's the progress bar was like the main thing that helped. Okay, so we made this project. What kind of data are we getting? And the first thing I want to say is just like I was floored by the quantity of data that we got. So like I said, like our initial IRB application said that we thought we might get 50 people. We have over 7,600 individual submissions from over 1,600 individual diarists, ranging across 3 age groups. The adults are like vastly overrepresented, so we're continually trying to find out how we can recruit and retain more kids and teens because their speech really matters for language change. And we have over 1,600 hours of audio diary, which is about 17 million words. For reference, the sort of gold standard of sociolinguistic corpora is the Philadelphia Neighborhood Corpus of naturalistic speech, which is about 1 million words. So this is, in terms of sociolinguistic data, this is big data. The project started in April of 2020, and it is continuing on through today. So we changed the name to Michigan Diaries because we discovered that people were interested in continuing to tell us about their lives even after COVID was like a very salient feature of their life. And actually, we're still recruiting new diarists, which is not that relevant for you because none of you live in Michigan, so none of you are eligible to participate. But if you know anybody living in Michigan, please invite them to participate. Okay, the quality of the data is another thing that I actually am both relieved and it feels weird to brag about this, but like I'm actually floored by the quality of data. Here's what I mean. People record and they're just monologuing, right? Because it's just them talking into their phone. But what we get is still, nevertheless, a very wide stylistic range of data. This is in part because we've worked pretty hard to develop methods to obtain a wide range of styles remotely. This is work that I did together with my PhD student, Adam Barnhart, who also did one of his comp papers analyzing an individual participant between the ages of 11 and 14 and analyzed how she pronounced stuff when she was taking like a teenager stance versus when she was taking like a I'm a little baby stance. And it turns out she pronounces things differently. You can ask me questions about that in the question period if you want. My point here is that we're getting a really wide stylistic range, which is awesome for my data. The audio quality is sufficient for acoustic analysis, especially for vowels, And then, of course, anything that's bigger than that, like lexical variation or syntactic variation, that's very easy to see because you don't have to acoustically measure it. And then a really nice bonus of this is that remote recording enables many recordings longitudinally over a participant's lifespan without using researcher time. So it's cheaper to get data because I don't have to use my time to go get the data. There's trade-offs to this. Ethnography really still has a very important role in sociolinguistics, but there's a lot of benefit to sort of supplementing traditional methods with something like this. The other benefit is, so longitudinal recordings, getting data from a single person over multiple time points in their life is hard to do because it's hard to convince people to meet up with you multiple times, and also adds this potential confound where as they get more familiar with you, that could impact how they talk. The fact that we're remote means that that's not a confound in the data. They're not getting more familiar with me. If we see a change, it's because they're actually changing. And then the other thing is that just participants really open up to us. So the speech that we're getting is naturalistic. It's more systematic, which is great for me. And this is basically like, I think we are doing a good job as a project of making participants feel like they can trust us with their important personal stories. So here's an example. This is a diary that we got last year from a third grader, and he's trying to process the sort of friendship shifting that happens when you are in third grade.
So today at recess, just me, the three of my friends wanted to play like just the us four. Then the other people who we normally play soccer with didn't agree to that, and they got really mad because when they were coming, they stole the ball we were using. Well, it wasn't really a ball, it was bouncy balls, and those work best for playing soccer, even though it's not a real ball. And they got super mad at us for not being able to share it and stuff, so they told on the teachers. But since I was being nicer to them by saying to my friends, okay, we already had some time to play just the us four, so now I think we should play with them, but they didn't really agree. And it was hard for me to pick which side I should be on, so I was kind of in between. I don't think my friends realized that I wasn't following them a bunch. But the other group who we normally played with, they got really mad. And like I said, they told the teacher, and they said that that the other few people that I was with could play with them if they asked. But then they said I could because I was nicer, I guess.
So you see, he's navigating his social world and his social identity that is starting to emerge out of this. Because we're calling it a diaries project, and because every week we send out an email asking people to tell us about their lives, we also ask them many more questions than that, which you should ask me about if you want to. But we get a lot of data like this, where people tell us, like, this thing happened this week. I'm trying to process it. Emotionally. I say emotionally because the next slide says, how are we processing this data? And I mean computationally. So here we have a problem, which is that naturalistic speech is really messy.
Sorry, quick question. You've used the word sister like a couple of times. Could you explain what that means, please?
Yes. What I really mean is that people don't intentionally shift how they're pronouncing things when they're speaking more naturalistically. And so if my question is like, how is pronunciation changing from one generation to the next, it really matters to me that I'm actually getting an actual snapshot of what they sound like. So if I, for instance, ask you, to say that word,
And?
yeah, were you thinking about how you pronounced it?
No.
Yeah, you were. Okay, wait. Where's my Wisconsin person? Or Minnesota? Yeah. Vague. I put him in the position of thinking about how he's pronouncing that word because we're talking about it, he's thinking about it, and he has to make the decision in that moment, am I going to say bag like a Minnesotan, or am I going to say bag so that nobody here makes fun of me, right? If I am speaking to Dan in a more naturalistic way and we're just having a conversation, it's more likely that he's going to say bag and not even think about it because our brain is focusing on something else. That's really what I mean. Great question. Okay. Oh yeah, so our goal is to capture how people actually talk. It's a different genre from things like call center or text, in part because people aren't thinking about it, but also specifically because it's super messy. Real stories do not come in complete sentences. Super emotional speech include many false starts and interruptions, and we care about all of that. We care about things like filler words. For instance, do you say or do you say Turns out this is a gendered feature in most varieties of American English, where women are a little bit more likely to say men are a little bit more likely to say One of our undergrads affiliated with the project was interested in how our non-binary speakers in the project use or so they did a research project on that. Okay, so right now what we're doing is like a first pass with Google ASR, and then that gets hand corrected by transcribers because, again, we need it to match exactly because we're taking acoustic measurements and we're doing things like tracking what your filler words are. This is great. It compared to like manually transcribing everything, it cuts everything down from around 20 minutes of human work per 1 minute of speech to around 4 minutes of human work to 1 minute of speech, which is a pretty big improvement. The data comes in, and we manage it in what we're calling the Michigan Diaries admin portal. This is work that was done with Russ Werner, who's at Michigan State, Jack Rexiner, who's right there, who is now a PhD student at Pitt, but was previously an MA student at Michigan State working with the Diaries Project, and Connor Beckler, who is at Michigan State now. Okay, the documentation is up and live, and like you can use it and adapt it. That's the advertisement part of the talk. I took a screen grab to try to show you guys what it looks like on the back end, and it turns out I went way faster than I can talk. So here we go. You log in. You can see all of the audio files that come in. It's got some metadata like participant ID, date. You can view now the individual diary entry. Transcribers can like tag it as being in process of being edited or not. There's a toggle here called not for research, which matters because occasionally somebody will tell us a story and then after the fact they'll say, oh, please don't include this in your research. This one is not for research. So okay, we can tag individual diary entries as being not for research. This is an uncorrected transcript, so this is an example of what comes back to us from Google. Our transcribers edit in browser, which is great because they can do that work wherever they are. They can change the time chunks. They can change, occasionally we get diary entries with multiple speakers in it. And then we've built in here a syntax checker to make sure that whatever we're coming up with can be fed through the Montreal Forced Aligner and then extracted with Fave. This one is just to show you that people can include pictures. And then this speaker has a few words that are not in our dictionary, like open-minded and chicken shit. So there was an easy way to add that to our pronunciation dictionary. That's subject management, which doesn't really matter. Here's our dictionary, which we started with the CMU pronunciation dictionary, and then we've just been adding to it since we have a lot of words that aren't in there. There's reporting functions. This is for our project manager to pay people. So our payment system is like, if you do 15 minutes of audio diary, you get a $5 gift card. And so this just tells us for each week who has like hit that bar. One of the things, so part of what we're trying to do is like ship this infrastructure out to anybody who could use something like this For instance, if you are a professor and you want students to do, let's hypothetically say you're a professor in Flagstaff, Arizona, and you teach history, and you want your students to do a walking tour of Green Book locations for African American history class in Flagstaff, Arizona. You can say to your students, go to these locations and record a diary entry, and I need one a week. And this will let you see whether or not your students have achieved it. That is an actual person that we're trying to work with to get this up and running for them. Okay. Oh. There's some more things we can content search, and I don't know why I didn't show you an example here. We can search our ASR transcripts for words of interest. So let's say that there are diary entries that have to do with keywords that I care about that haven't been human corrected yet. I can prioritize them in the transcription list. And then there's a couple things at the end here that are for me managing my my processing pipeline. So corrected transcript gets shipped off to the Montreal forced aligner. It gets force aligned. It gets shipped off to the Fave automatic vowel extraction suite, and then I get measurements on the back end. Okay, so the real thing is the admin portal can manage incoming audio files. It's got ASR and in-browser transcription correction. That's the part that if you speak to like a humanities researcher, they go, what? Can I please have one? Because hand correction, like hand transcription takes forever, and humanities researchers don't use ASR. So, and then subject management, which is just great. Okay, cool framework. How is it useful? This is part 2 of my talk where I just get to tell you about some of the cool stuff that we've been finding with this data. So the first thing is that the corpus is enormous, in part because people like participating, and in part because it's easy for them to participate. So we have a lot of data, and it turns out that having this much data can let us like really zoom into individual speakers to see how they are helping sound change or language change happen. Okay, here's my quick sidebar for those of you who don't spend all day looking at vowel plots like I do. I'm going to be talking about vowels and how they're changing. Here's how I'm getting a sense of how they're changing. So you can take a recording. This is me saying panda bear.
Panda bear.
Panda bear. Okay, so you've got your waveform on top. You've got your spectrogram down here. This is just a Fourier transform of the wave file. And I can zoom in on this sound. So here's my zoom in. And what I'm looking at is these like these lines. These are called formants. Every vowel has 3, but I'm focusing on 2. Well, actually, vowels have often more than that. The point is the first 2 are the ones that matter. And I'm going to measure them. I'm taking my cursor here, and I'm going about 1/3 of the way through the vowel, and I'm going to measure what that number is in hertz and what that number is in hertz, and that's a measure of how this person is pronouncing that vowel. So I lost my whatever. So I'm going to put that in the corner, those values. I can say this word in a different way.
Panda bear.
Panda bear. And the measurements are going to be different. Here you can see they're both lower. So those are our 2 measurements. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these measurements and we're going to plot them in 2-dimensional space with F1 on the y-axis and F2 on the x-axis going backwards. Here's why. It turns out that roughly matches. I drew that. It roughly matches like the spot in your mouth where the energy is concentrated. So when linguists talk about like being fronter in the mouth, the measurements will actually show up as being fronter on this plot. So we can plot our 2 vowels in this space, and we can see that panda bear is there and panda bear is there. Okay, that's the abstract version. You're going to see a bunch of plots that look like this, where each one of these gray dots is an individual vowel pronunciation. And then what I've done is I've drawn 95% confidence ellipses around each vowel. So there's 2 vowels represented there. That's what it looks like. Okay. Here's what we found. This is joint work that I did with Daniel Greason, who was also an MA student at Michigan State, is now a PhD student at Stony Brook. And here is a schema of language change that's happening in Michigan. So if you imagine the plot that I just showed you, this first bubble corresponds to like that circle up there, hand, and that second bubble corresponds to trap, right? So 2 pronunciations. So the situation is that Michigan English is undergoing a pretty big change, especially in that trap vowel. Some other things too, but I'm focusing here just on this split in the trap phonological class into 2 allophones. So you've got your hand versus trap. And I didn't put this on the slide, but what I meant to put on the slide is that the triggering context is that if an ash vowel happens before any nasal, m, n, or ng, it gets tensed and raised, hand, man, manage, and then everything else is lax, dad, trap, bat. Okay. Now there's some previous research that looked at this changing in Michigan English. This is Monica Nesbitt's work. And the basic picture is that back in the day, so you've got Jack over here, he's a silent generation speaker. I don't know why I walked over there, I have this on the slide. He's got a raised single target. All of his sounds sound like yeah. Dad, hat, man, manage. In a subsequent generation, what you see is some community members developing a phonetic distinction. So you've got Michelle, who is from Gen X, and she's got what's called a raised continuous system. And she doesn't produce 2 distinct targets, but there is starting to be like a distinction in her pronunciation where pre-nasal tokens are a little bit tenser. Then there's social conditioning, which I'm not talking to you about, but is true. And then in this last generation, so Ben, who's a millennial, is exhibiting a phonological rule. So he's tensing all short A before all nasals, which I'm representing in SPE style, just because I find it easy to write. Okay, so what we want to know is like, what's the pathway to change? How are individual speakers, what are they doing that's causing a community level change? Nesbitt 2023, I'm just putting this up here because it's a really cool paper. She looked at both production data and subphonemic judgment tasks. So she's getting like how individual speakers actually conceptualize these sounds, and then also production data. So she's arguing that this is happening through what she calls a gradual phonological rule emergence. So we wanted to know, like, what does this look like? What are individual speakers doing that enables this cross-generationally? And part of our motivation was that Daniel has a weird short A system. He is an early Gen Z Michigander. He has a hand trap split, so hand trap, but also he raises and tenses in words like challenge and talented, where you have an unstressed l intervening between the a and the nasal. So yeah. Anybody else have challenge raising? Jack. Jack told me yesterday that they did, and I was like, that's amazing. Okay, so we're thinking that this is like, for Daniel, probably like a long distance nasal conditioning thing that's happening. It just happens to be like the l is just transparent to this conditioning. And we think that because he doesn't also, it's not that he raises in all pre-L tokens, which I'm putting this here because there is precedent for a dialect just happening to raise their pre-L tokens, as Aaron Dinkin found in Philadelphia. So we wanted to know, like, is this spontaneous idiosyncratic reanalysis? Like, is Daniel just weird? Was really the question. You can see that I'm scoping ahead to the answer no, because Jack also has this. So we wanted to know, do other individual speakers have this type of a system? So we're looking for other weird speakers in the data set. So here's how we're finding them. I'm beginning with speakers who have a statistical distinction between their hand and trap classes, who have at least one token of a challenge type word. This is a data quantity problem because challenge type words are a really infrequent context in naturalistic speech. So we need about 1 to 2 hours of speech from each speaker in order to find this. So we found 16 speakers. There are more. We just have a huge backlog of corrected transcripts. So this is just to say we're not restricted to 16 speakers. We just are for right now in this moment. So each speaker has a tense hand and a lax trap. You can see here, this is a speaker born in 1994 who tenses in words like, ooh, canceled and ham. This guy does ham radio stuff, so he says the word ham a lot. And then lax and black, ham, black. Okay. Then what I do is I plot their challenge and their chalice words to see if they're tense or lax. So he has lax, talent, and challenges. Challenges. And then also lax before L. Palestine, California, alto. That probably is the wrong word, actually. I should have said alpha. Okay. So out of our 16 speakers that we've collected for this subset of data, between 6 and 8 of them have the canonical hand trap split. I'm saying between 6 and 8 because 2 of our speakers only have 1 token of challenge words. So if you don't find that convincing, you can hear that I'm saying 6 speakers have the canonical split. I think that these are pretty solid evidence that they have the canonical hand trap split, because if they had the chalice system or the challenge system, these words would be tensed. Okay. 7 out of 16 have Greason's challenge split. So this is a speaker who says, can't. Really nice tense can't compared to cat. And then he tenses in words like calendar, challenges, but lax in words like Ralphie. He's a 4th grade teacher who was teaching The Mouse and the Motorcycle. There's a character called Ralphie. Okay, so 7 out of 16 have that system, and then 1 person has tensing before all pre-Ls. So
rambunctious.
So still this split,
Trap.
But then
balance values,
right? Okay. So this is like very preliminary work. So I don't have like a real story here. This is an emerging story. But if you plot each of these 16 speakers based on their date of birth and their system. Oh, I should say something real quick about gender in our data set. You can see that this person has a lowercase m male. A previous person had an uppercase m male. That's because when people sign up for the project, they self-report what their gender is. So it's just whatever they've reported that their gender is. This set of data just happened to be binary, just men and women. Okay, so they're color-coded according to their gender and whether they have the hand trap system, the challenge system, or the chalice system. And it's curious that our challenge speakers precede our hand trap speakers in this data set. So this gets to the sociolinguistic transmission problem. Specifically, how do these intermediate system speakers contribute to community-level sound change? It seems like they might be paving the way for a full hand trap split. The alternative is that they are kind of responding to variability in their input, and they're just reanalyzing it a little bit wrong. To tease these apart, we need a little bit more data, especially from Gen X and earlier. I want to know like what's happening, more people here. And I unfortunately need to dive deeper into the continuous system speakers. I'm saying unfortunately because that becomes an unsupervised classification problem, which is a difficult problem. Okay, that's my first like cool potential finding. Here's another cool thing about the project. Because we're using ASR, it enables researchers to identify audio files that are relevant for their research question. So this is work that's done by my PhD student, Jess Shepard, where she's looking at, so her comp paper is titled Men as Important Leaders of a Linguistic Change in Michigan. So she's looking at words like button. This is phonologically button, but canonically pronounced like button with a glottal stop and then a nasal release. And there's 2 changes happening. The first change is that this nasal release gets pronounced with a full vowel, button, written. And the second is that having this intervocalic context now enables T to become a flap, button. Okay. Previous work in Utah and in Long Island was restricted to either anecdotal observations that this exists, or wordless data, or experimental data, and that's because this is a super rare context. It happens at post-tonic ton, so unstressed ton after a stressed syllable, happens about 15 times per million words, so it's very rare. So we have more words than that, so that's great. We have the potential to find speakers with these words, but also we can boost words of interest by, like I said, we send out an email to participants every week with questions that they can choose to answer if they want. And one of the questions that we sent out for Jess was, what's the difference between being certain and being sure? Yeah. So we got a lot of tokens of people being like, well, when you're certain, it means that you blah, blah, blah. Okay. So then she searched our ASR-generated transcripts to find 57 speakers who were raised in Michigan, who had at least 10 tokens of words of interest. So 10 button-type tokens. So that's how many she had. So the big picture here is that she found evidence of a change in t from this like canonical glottal pronunciation to a flap. All right, here's my plot of it. Here's her plot of it. So you've got birth year along the x-axis. Each point represents an individual speaker. Each individual speaker is actually represented twice. Once for when they pronounce button with a nasal release, and once for when what proportion of the time do they pronounce button with a vowel release. Okay, that will make more sense in a second. And then it's color-coded. Women in the sample are red and men are blue. And the big finding here is that male identifying participants are leading this change. This is rare. You almost never get male-led sound change. Like this is a surprising finding, and it is a brand new finding, so I don't have more to say about that than the fact that this is surprising. This is the rate of flapping. So you can see flaps are on the rise at the expense of the glottal. And then there are a few speakers that do like a full T release. That's just a little quirk. There's one more weird thing about the data here, which is that our very first instance of a flap in the data set actually occurs with a nasal release, button. That's not the story. The story is that first you get the vowel, and that phonologically feeds, that creates a context that enables this other thing. But here we have both happening at the same time. So that's also weird. Vowel release doesn't feed flapping. Jess is finding some evidence that her argument is that this may have been borrowed as a late-stage process from African American English. African American English in Detroit has both of these features about 2 generations before, and in the order that you would expect. First the vowel happens, and then the flap happens. So her hypothesis is that speakers in our data set who are doing both things at once are actually just borrowing it straight from African American English. Okay.
Do you know if the data points correspond to African American people?
They don't, in part because there were no African American speakers in our data set with more than 10 tokens. So this has been a point of frustration for Jess in particular, because we really want to know, like, are our black speakers producing this feature? And so part of the thing to say is that demographics of Michigan are very white. So we don't have very many black speakers to begin with. And then button context is also very rare. So there weren't enough speakers to include. If you drop it down to speakers with at least 3 tokens, then we have, I think, 6 black speakers in the data set, and they all have higher rates of flapping than the white speakers. But 3 is not a great sample size. She came to this conclusion in part also by looking at data from CORAL, the Corpus of Regional African American Language, that has data from Detroit. Okay, that was a great question. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to highlight is just the longitudinal nature of the project means that we can ask pretty interesting questions about individual speakers as they develop sociolinguistically. So here's one example of a project. This was done by an undergrad in linguistics at Georgetown who works with the project, Ife. And she looked at an individual speaker between the ages of 5 and 9, so 5 years, 9 months to 9 years, 1 month. And she analyzed his narratives. So anytime he told a narrative, what was the structure of that narrative? And did it develop over these 4 years, or 3.5 years? Okay, so a little bit of background. She's using the narrative analysis framework from Lebov and Waletsky that identifies 5 types of clauses when you tell a story. This is specifically for oral narratives of personal experience. So the 5 clause types are abstract. That's like the summary of the story before you tell it. So if I were to like run in and say like, oh my God, did I tell you about the time my dad got framed for murder? A real story that actually happened, kind of. Okay, here's an example from my data. 2 days ago, something really annoying happened for the whole class, right? Then the orientation, this is background information that the listener needs. Orientation clauses often happen throughout a narrative because somebody will start telling a story and then they'll realize like, oh, I forgot to tell you blah, blah, blah. So we were having snack, that's the background. And then complicating action. These are actions told in the order that they happened in real life, but then one person didn't pick up their wrappers. So we had to sit on the carpet. And then evaluation clauses. This is when speakers morally evaluate something. So that was kind of annoying. And then the coda. This is the speaker bringing us back to the present moment. In this example, the speaker actually says, anyway, that's all I'm going to say. That's the whole story. Yeah.
That's why you're wrong, but I read work a while ago that shows that the way that you can differentiate between like stories that are lies and stories that are the truth is that the true lies are usually like less structured. Like the true stories are usually less structured than the like kind of like imagined stories.
I don't know anything about that research, but I don't do narrative analysis, so Ife's interest in it was exciting to me because I got to like learn some more things about the data. But that feels...
So you plan a lot, but when you talk about your personals, you might like forget certain aspect of it that was.
Yeah, like yeah. So what I was going to say is like a lie is like a little bit more rehearsed, but I actually do have something to say about this, which is that we have a few speakers in our data set that have retold an important story in their life at a couple of different time points in the data. And the story, the details of the story don't change, but the structure of the story changes in each instance. I don't know. I assume that people are telling me truthful things, so I don't have like I don't have like a lie story, but that's a really interesting idea. Because what I can tell you is that like even when speakers repeat a story that they clearly have told multiple times, like oh man, now I really want to show you. We have a speaker who when she was in third grade, when she was in 3rd grade, the most embarrassing thing in the world happened to her, which is that she had a crush on a boy, and she really wanted to kiss him, so she chased him at recess and kissed him and got in trouble for it. And then the very next day, it was square dancing in gym class, and she got partnered up with him. April 18th, that's when it happened. And I know that because every single time she's told that story, she tells me the date. So she's told that story. We have 3 instances of that story in our data set, and the structure changes actually every time. So that's very interesting. Okay, so we've got these 5 clause types. Complicating action is the thing that actually makes it count as a story according to this framework. So if I say like, I came in the room and I sat down. That's an action and an action told in the order that it happened. That's a narrative. It's a very boring, bad narrative, but it's a narrative. There are very few studies that analyze how children tell stories, like very, very few. The information that we do have says that children often omit the abstract and the coda, so they don't know how to bring a listener from the present moment to the past and back to the present again. And as children get older, they do a little bit more evaluation. I don't have this on the slide, but one of the reasons this actually matters is one of these papers, I think it's the Peterson and McCabe study, was looking at how the criminal justice system deals with children witnesses. So if you need to get witness information from a child, it's important to know how children tell stories, especially if you're trying to find out, are they making something up or are they telling you something true? Thinking about your example about lies versus true. So this is a case where like knowing how kids do things actually is important ramifications for the world out there. And there are no longitudinal studies on how children's narratives develop as they grow older, because tracking data from kids as they get older is very difficult, unless you have the Michigan Diaries Project. So Ife looked at a single speaker, and she took every single instance of his anytime he told a narrative and analyzed it. Here's what I'm going to say. You have his age in years on the x-axis, narrative length in number of utterances on the y-axis. So as you go up, the stories get longer. So you can see that he's getting longer in stories as he ages, but actually, really, there's more variation in narrative length. He's still telling quite short stories also, but he can tell really long stories. You get some stories actually that are like embedded within each other as he gets older. Okay. Oh, the color here corresponds to, she was also interested in what percentage of the time did he have to get prompted by an adult to tell the next line of the story. And you can see that when he's 6, it's quite a few times. And then there's this big gap in recording because he just didn't feel like doing it, which fine. And then by the time he comes back to the project around a little over 7.5, his mom is not on the recordings anymore. He has kicked her out and he's just talking to us. There is an increase in the percent of evaluation clauses. This is hard to see because that's represented by point size, which is just hard to interpret. But the point is, he tells more he evaluates what he's talking about more as he gets older. And then as the child gets older, there's also more codas. He's more likely to bring you back into the present moment and say, for instance, that's all I'm going to say about this. I'm done. Okay. That's there in case you want to follow it to Ife's Google Dropbox of some actual stories from this child. Okay, part 3 of the talk is sharing the infrastructure, because like I said, this talk is meant to be a little bit of an advertisement. This infrastructure has huge potential more broadly. It is very time consuming to do in-person interviews and oral histories, and it's very time consuming to do manual transcription. In 2022, I got an NEH grant to help make this infrastructure easily adaptable. So I showed you the admin side. Here's the app side. This is an in-browser app builder that, like, literally in real time, I can take the app and customize it to, like, let's say hypothetically I was at a university that had like red as their color and like maybe a university logo that's like, yeah, like Carnegie Mellon, maybe hypothetically. I made a nice app name for you. Cool name, Let's Record. I mean, can't get wrong. Don't use this logo. This is Microsoft's. They probably won't like that. But you can customize certain aspects of it. Like if you don't want to let them upload a photo, you can get rid of that capability. You can get rid of statistics if you don't like having gamification, if it's not relevant for you. You can get rid of the progress bar, or if you're like me, realize that you forgot to change the colors on the progress bar and it looks ugly, so like let's change the colors. Yeah, great. So this is the part that's easy for folks in other fields to do. The part that's a little bit tricky is the configuration and the identifiers. Oh, I just added the statistics back in just so you could see they exist. So what we've built is something that like somebody who is not good with computers could take this and talk to somebody who can help them set up a server, get like a couple pieces of information and put it together. Okay, so what about you guys at CMU? Like, maybe you don't need that much hand-holding, but like maybe you do. I don't know. If you can think of any use for this app, I really honestly would love for you to do it because we've only tried it out with people at Michigan State so far. We're looking for non-MSU folks to beta test it. Like we want to know, great, it works with MSU's servers. Like how does it do here? If you are interested in sociolinguistics, consider joining Michigan Diaries. You may have noticed that roughly half of the people that whose projects I showcased were not at Michigan State at the time that they were doing research with us. We have space in our research project for a handful of non-MSU students. Okay, cards on the table. I added the word volunteer to this slide because my NEH grant got cut last week, which is a bummer. But in the spirit of like hopeful optimism, I'm going to say that there's still space for you to come join our project. And if we can find funding for you, we will try to pay you. And I'm just going to end by highlighting some of our goals with this infrastructure going forward. We would like to not use Google anymore for ASR for a couple of reasons. Really what we would like to do is have people have the capability of plugging in whatever model they would like, especially for things like low resource languages. We have a couple of language documentation folks who would like to use something like a remote recording app to collect data in like rural China or sub-Saharan Africa. So Google English ASR is not going to be useful for them. Also things like different dialects, like African American English and other non-standard dialects. We think that we could be that any model that you put in could be retrainable with its own data, especially for our own data, as we're having like hand-corrected transcriptions constantly improving. And this is just like, I'm saying this because you guys are computer folks. So like we tried something and it didn't work that great. It didn't work that great because it was super slow, and we need things to have a very fast turnaround. We're getting like hour-long diary entries, and I'm a mandatory reporter, so I need to know if one of our diarists is talking about suicide. And I need to know it pretty quickly. Okay, and then, like I said, sorry, that was kind of a bummer to say, but it's true. We want to test it out with non-MSU folks. We have a few people kind of in our list who have already expressed interest. So this includes community-based projects. There's an Appalachian quilting group that wants to collect oral histories of like older quilters and like their life story. Like I said, there's language documentation folks working in rural areas that could see a use for an app. And then pedagogy. Oh, I told you already about the Green Book walking tour professor who wants to use one. There's another, there's an archaeology professor who wants to use an app like this to collect student reflections during a study abroad in Greece. And then like, your project here, use it if you want to. That would be great. That's the end. So you guys were asking questions throughout, which was delightful, but hopefully you have more questions. Yeah?
In the vowel, it's like a hang shut vowel thingy. Do you take the context of the actual narrative into account? Because I imagine specifically for me, for example, I think you were talking about this before, is like I have a work accent, right? So if I'm emotionally processing something at work, I probably default to that work accent. But like if I'm talking about, I don't know, Bangalore, then I think I will start going into my more Bangalore English accent. And I wonder, like, is that affects? I mean, I'm sure that affects, but like, is there a way for you to figure that out?
Yeah, that is a really good suggestion. What we haven't done that, but totally possible. We have the words, we have the context, right? One thing that we have done is, so Adam looked at stance taking in these different pronunciations. So these are both instances of the trap context, but you can hear she tenses in this one.
Back, back, back,
Back, and she laxes in this one.
fast, fast.
And the hypothesis here is that when she's taking a child-oriented stance, like, ooh, I'm being bullied, I need some help.
I have to sit next to him, the kid that was bullying me. And so I informed my teacher via email, and I wrote like a page-long essay, and she wrote like a page-long essay back.
Okay, compared to when she's like taking on an older stance, so that this is the newer pronunciation is laxer.
My one friend that I do feel like I have is not growing up as fast as I am.
So that's a very lax pronunciation. So Adam did a lot of work to look at like this individual speaker and when she's taking on a teenage stance versus a child stance. I made this slide before his results were complete because this is a really nice example of her doing like the new thing when she's talking like a teenager and the old thing when she's talking like a child. Turns out that she does change her pronunciation, but not reliably across these contexts of that pronunciation. She does change her use of creaky voice. So she does more creaky voice when she's acting like a teenager, which, yeah, I see you guys nodding because you're like, well, that makes sense. That sounds like a sort of teenage affect. Yeah.
So I have a question that kind of follows up on that question, and it's something I was thinking about during your talk. And it has to do with this kind of historical debate among the kinds of sociolinguists that I had been around, you know. So at Pitt, I was around people who were doing a lot of variationist work. So they're like the parody of this is that you like reduce people to a vector of demographic features, you know, and then you count, you try to predict linguistic behavior based on these features, sort of. You know,
Yeah, like I'm a middle-class white woman from Michigan, so therefore I talk like this.
The people that I encountered when I was in grad school were very dismissive of that and said, no, you can't study things that way because what people do linguistically is more about the interactions between people, you know, and not so much about some kind of static representation.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have the potential here to use lots of data like a variationist kind of approach, but to account for or to incorporate a model of like a discourse kind of related model, you know, where you look at how people are constructing their identity within a conversation rather than just some, you know.
Yeah.
So my question, that was a long, like, throat clearing to get to my question, which is, you know, is there a way of, with data like this, where you have this, you know, 1,600 hours of data transcribed, where you can, like, satisfy both the variationists and the interactionists?
Okay. Not yet, but that is actually exactly the topic of my career grant. Because, okay, so part of the issue is that, like, the argument that, like, first wave variationist studies is reductive, reducing people down to, like, their demographic features, I don't think that's actually a fair criticism if you actually read the studies, but okay. Yeah. And then you've got like this, but I know that that's like the way that it's talked about in the field. And then you've got people who are like, no, language is creative and social and people can construct their social identity, especially based on who they're talking to, okay? When you dig down deep to both of those things, they are actually the same thing, right? In the sense that like who I am able to talk to and who I choose to talk to becomes the structure that I am now embedded in, becomes the social demographics that I'm a part of. And so things like my social class, my ethnicity, these things are not 100% predictive of how you talk, but there are, because of the way that society works and the sort of structural constraints on who you can interact with, the pictures end up looking very similar. I'm saying this in part based on a paper of mine that just came out in Language Variation and Change that looked at exactly this question of how much freedom do people have in how they pronounce things. So I was looking at this language change that was happening in Philadelphia, and I wanted to know, and the language change was very interesting because it was like the old thing was very Philadelphia specific. So if you did this thing, you sounded like a Philadelphian. The new thing is non-regionally specific. It's like the hand trap split. And I thought, like, hey, I bet if people are really aligned with the city of Philadelphia and feel really affiliated with it, I bet they'll sound more Philadelphian. And that is basically true, except they're constrained by the social structures that they're a part of. So if you take a look at the schools that people attend, that puts limits on where they can put their language. So overall, the elite public schools have this new thing. All of the kids that are coming out of the elite public schools have the nasal system. The guy in my data set that is like the most Philadelphian and the most like, he's got like tokens where he says like, he wants to be a radio broadcaster, so his accent really matters. And he has he had an example where one of his professors like made fun of him for saying class, and also water. And we have this clip of him, it's like, I say class, I say class, it's not class. I'm like, yeah, like you go. Okay, and he grew up working in a hoagie shop. Like this guy is like as Philadelphian as you can get. But he went to an elite public high school. And he does not have the Philly system. What he has is like this intermediate halfway system. In the local Catholic schools, which is like the strongest holdout of the Philly system, what you have is most people having the Philly system. And if they are really oriented away from Philly, they don't want to live in Philly, they think that the other measure of this is like how well do you orient to the ideology of the city of Philadelphia, which I'm classifying as something like opposition to authority and like grittiness and like, you know, you think it's funny to like, I don't know, swear at your teachers, whatever, do drugs. Okay. So the more you align with the ideology of Philadelphia, the more Philadelphia is sound. But if you are surrounded by people with the new system, the most Philly you can get is like partway there. Versus if you are in a local Catholic school, most of the kids around you sound Philadelphian. And if you really orient away from that, if you are, this beautiful clip of a speaker saying like, she's talking about tutoring in a high school and the way they treated their teachers. So disrespectful. Okay, she thinks it's good to respect authority, but the closest she can get is halfway to the nasal system. So you can shift what you're doing, but you can't shift all the way. This is to say, like, the social structures that you are embedded in, either intentionally or accidentally, put constraints on what you can do creatively with your language. And this actually matters. I mean, so this is really interesting because, like, Justin, who doesn't have the Philly system but is really Philadelphian, so Philadelphian that he asked me to use his first name, his actual first name, because, quote, I want everybody to know how much I love Philly. Like, if I were to take him compared to this girl who is, like, astonished that people would disrespect teachers, they have the same system, but it doesn't mean the same thing. This is a very long-winded way of saying, like, it really does matter to take both the sort of like broad demographic, socio-demographic structures in place and also the importance of how speakers can use their language to index their social identity. This also kind of a cop-out answer because I'm basically saying both and. But I really do think it is a disservice to speakers to disregard how constraining social structures can be on how flexible your language can be. Yeah.
in contexts like these, how much of like the locality of your social structure has changed by like being online? Like looking at the kids that are not online at all versus like teenagers that are online constantly, but also still exist in their mode, allegedly.
Yeah. Okay, so that actually was like part of the motivation of me and Suzanne saying like we need to get data immediately, is because every time a media technology happened in the history of the US, linguists went, oh no, we're going to lose regional dialects. So when radio, right? So when radios came into people's houses in the early 20th century, we all thought regional dialects would go away, but they didn't. And then when TV got into people's homes in the 1950s, we all thought, oh, regional dialects are going to go away, but they didn't. Now it's internet. People all think regional dialects are going to go away. And I'm not sure if they are or not. Like, actually, like, we're still trying to figure out if they're going away. But, sorry, okay, good. Teasing those things apart. No, let me back up a step and say, we think that the reason that TV and radio didn't impact regional dialects is that actually what matters for individual speakers is the humans that they are interacting with and also overhearing in their life. So like, if you're a third grader, you are overhearing how the fifth graders talk. You're overhearing how the teachers talk. You're also hearing how your grandparents talk and how your parents talk. So that's one fact that like, the idea is that having all of this data is an important part of like narrowing down to your dialect. There's this separate sort of mystery, which is that most speakers seem like they're just kind of ignoring other input that they could be taking seriously. They could be taking TV seriously, but most speakers just don't. In part, we think because it's not interactive. So this is where the internet is more interesting because the internet is potentially interactive. Depends what you're doing, right? Like if you're like watching YouTube essays versus whatever else kids do online. Yeah, I don't know. I'm an old person now. I don't know what kids do. Do you, Emma? You know what kids do?
No, I think this is old. I was skibbity toilet.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. What?
Is that Roblox?
Is that from Roblox? Or you're saying Roblox is what they do online?
Minecraft.
Yeah, they do Minecraft, which is a movie now, I guess. I hear it's good. Jack Black.
Oh wow.
Great. Yeah. Okay. I haven't seen it, so that's not an endorsement. Okay, so it's a really interesting question, and like the end of my sentence is I'm actually not sure how we could get the kind of data that would speak to that question. So part of the answer is we can just wait and see if regional dialects go away. I don't think they are. They're changing. So the things that you could pick up as being Philadelphian are changing to being a different thing. And this is in part my own optimism because I love regional dialects, but I really think that they're not going away. So I guess TBD. Is that no, that was a...
As
Yeah.
a potential follow-up to that, do you have people in your data who might be immigrants and you've seen how longitudinally their language changes?
Would you?
I also like this internet aspect. The next line in that is large language models, hello LTI. And people are adopting the large language models, and in our experiences of like whatever evaluations we've done and data we've seen, the language there is even 1 degree more homogeneous, or like maybe a couple of degree more homogeneous than
From the speaker or from the language model?
like text from language models, but also like ASR systems, right? Like we were talking about how like if you design, like there'll be like ASR that sounds like Indian English, but then it's like all the cliches of Indian English put together, right? And so, yeah, like I genuinely think that's like 1 degree of more amplification of homogenization than internet. And so what's happening there? So I wonder if like immigrants actually interacting with like more standard American English speakers is like a possibly close approximation
of like coming into contact with that kind of speech that might homogenize your day.
Yeah, that is really nice. Okay, I have two separate thoughts to say. The first one is that I think you could do a really nice experiment where you set people up at the beginning, interacting online with somebody who's has like a neutral or a standard, whatever, a more non-salient dialect features. And you could easily see if by the end of like an hour of interaction, if they've changed. I think the answer would be that yes, because people accommodate to each other. The question is whether that actually impacts how they actually talk. And that's a little bit of a fuzzy question because, if those changes don't stick around an hour after that, then I wouldn't say that their language has changed. I would say that they just accommodated in the moment. But you can imagine a situation where, like, if you're doing that every day, multiple hours a day, maybe your language actually would change. Yeah, you would develop an accent. Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing I have to say about that. The second thing I have to say about that is, would you like to join the Michigan Diaries Project? Because we do actually have a lot of participants who are either the children of immigrants or themselves immigrants, and we haven't analyzed them at all, in part because we're like, we are just getting to a point where we can start analyzing the data. So there's a lot of questions that we haven't even investigated yet, and that's a really good question. There's an international school that we partnered with that has a lot of students who are second-generation immigrants. And we haven't specifically looked at immigrant status. Yeah. Right now, most of our analysis is restricted to, because we're trying to test questions that people have claimed about changes in Michigan English, like we are starting with Michigan-born participants who have Michigan-born parents, which really restricts our data. But like that's a really good question, and I would love for you to analyze it. Sorry, I'm scooping all of your students. I'm trying. I'm really trying. Well, I'm at MSU, but
We should get somebody from.
yeah, you should get someone from CMU. That'd be fun, a little merger.
It'd be confusing. We could,
Yeah.
It's confusing for me. So thank you very much for your presentations. My question is about the locality dimensions of the study. Right? So do you collect the multiple types of study subjects, or can you analyze changes with longer period of times?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the setup is very not controlled in the sense that, like, diaries just have... I actually don't know where my phone is. Diaries just have the app on their phone, and they can talk into it whenever they want. And so in practice, we have diarists that, like, talk every single day. Jack knows who. Yeah. We have one diarist that talks almost every single day. And he has been since 2020. We have he is like everybody's favorite diarist because he's very prolific. Yeah, we could. Like every time he has a first date with somebody, the whole team is like, I hope it goes well for you. And then as you saw with like our kid, he had like a whole year and a half where he just didn't participate. We try to add some regularity so we send out an email every Thursday afternoon. We've actually tested that out. What day of the week is the most likely to get people to respond? And the answer is Thursday, because Friday afternoon, they're doing their weekend already. Wednesday, they're still doing their work week. Thursday, you get an email at 2:30 p.m. on a Thursday. We might take a little walk and answer some questions. Why not? It feels like a pre-weekend thing. And then we send different questions every week, intending to keep people sort of stuck to the project. What are they going to ask this week? Pineapple on pizza. Do you like it? Right? People have very strong feelings about pineapple on pizza. Other things like, a couple weeks ago we asked one that was like, have you ever said something and then been immediately proven wrong? And we've got a lot of great stories about that happening in people's lives. So we're doing our best to make it enjoyable to participate so that we do get longitudinal data. And then we have like a very light payment incentive. So they get $5 if they do it every week, which is a very big incentive for our kids and our teens and not an incentive at all for our adults, as you might imagine. So your question was, like, how longitudinal is it? Yeah. So, yeah. So far we have somebody who's been participating for five years. And our goal is, like, this is the kind of data that gets more valuable the longer you can retain people. And so we're trying very hard to, like, okay, so we just had budget cuts. Our primary focus is maintaining enough project infrastructure so that participants continue to enjoy participating. Jack can maybe speak a little bit more to this. Jack and myself and Suzanne Wagner have written a lot about branding and how important branding actually is for a project like this, because we need participants to keep with the project. And when we talk about branding, really what we mean is, like, we have project values. Our top project values are trustworthiness and authenticity, because we need people to be able to speak with us authentically, and we need them to trust that we are going to take care of their data and that we're going to take care of their stories and treat them with care. And everything that we do, every single decision that we make about the project, we try to orient towards those two values. So this is, like, as small as, like, our project colors and our app logo, which, you know, like, minimally we want things that don't scream, I'm not trustworthy. So we do, you know, so it's partly about, like, the colors and the font and the pictures, and it's partly about, like, what partnerships with community organizations do we take on. Sometimes we've been approached by for-profit businesses, and we've kind of a bummer because they offer money, but we've turned down all of those partnerships because we think that it interferes with our value of trustworthiness. We don't want anybody to think anything potentially untrustworthy. So we're doing our hardest to keep the retention up. So hopefully in, like, 10 years, it'll be a really cool data set. And then, didn't get to say this. Okay, so the thing that I think can maybe tease apart this question of, like, structure versus individual participation is that really what you want is an entire cohort of speakers longitudinally over time. Because some speakers are going to be, like, leaders, some speakers are going to be reacting to what the leaders are doing. We want to know, like, is sociolinguistic development something that happens sort of the same way for all speakers? So the next phase of the project is to develop partnerships with middle schools to get kids participating. So we have a pilot teacher that we're working with right now, a 7th grade teacher, and we're getting, once a month, we're getting entries from every 7th grader in this school. And my hope is that we can convince, the thing I wrote in the grant is that my hope is that we can convince half of them to keep participating. So as long as it's fun for the 1 year that they have to do it for school, and then we can tell them, hey, you get $5 if you continue, that we would be able to track this entire cohort, or at least half of the cohort, as they age. And then I think that would also tell us some things about how that restricts the sort of macro-social context, because these kids are in the same structural context, but then you can see how they're able to use discourse and use pronunciation to sort of assert their social identity as they age. I realized I never actually answered I never got to the point where I was like, I had something to say, but I didn't say it.
The methodological question. So
yeah.
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 So I'm looking at, like, is this that sort of like trying to recap people on the data and everything? This is the thing where I'm kind of worked on a similar data set that involves personal disclosure which is not necessarily going to benefit the participants themselves beyond just compensation. I'm wondering if you have gotten any feedback that discusses how the participants feel about the act of participating and exactly what kind of benefit from it regardless.
Jeff.
We have participants on record thanking our project for giving them a place to like contribute their voice and giving them a sense of being heard, participating in citizen science. All
Therapeutic is, all, exactly. Therapeutic is a word that comes up a lot, which we have to be very careful about because we are not mental health professionals. And like I said, this is where my role as a mandatory reporter is important because I can't help you. But far and away, participants find value in actually sitting down and doing it. This is in part intentional. So some of the questions that we send out each week, every single week, 5 to 8 of the questions change, but 3 of the questions are the same. The questions that are the same are, what are you grateful for this week? Was anything difficult this week? And was there a news headline that stuck out to you? Those first 2 are asymmetrical in their presuppositions. So we presuppose that there's something to be grateful for. We don't presuppose that there's something that was difficult. We did that intentionally because we developed this project during COVID, and research shows that practicing gratitude helps relieve stress or helps reduce stress. So that's one way that we try to make participating in the project enjoyable. Another way is that every week our student team picks a handful of stories to feature on our website and go into our public-facing archive from participants who have opted in to this. And then in our email, we link to those stories and we give like a little blurb about the story. This week we heard from a person who ran into a skunk when they were walking their dog, whatever. We get diarists listening to those and responding to other diarists' stories. Again, we did that because it was COVID and we were trying to give people a sense of community. But it turns out that I think it is an important component of keeping people involved in the project. Like, our participants really have a lot of buy-in to the project. They feel warm and fuzzy about us, which is part of the point. And they feel warm and fuzzy about each other, at least whenever they talk about it. That's what we hear. And so your question was like, what was your question?
Yeah, it was about the ways that participants maybe actually do just genuinely, the ways that they feel about being able to talk about their experience. The stuff that I'm doing builds on these ideas that like talking about these experiences can be very helpful. Maybe not literally therapeutic, but there is something that is gained on an emotional level from that. And so like I've also sent some mom and pops just like, oh, I'm really glad that this is here kind of thing. And I wanted to know, that was case for your guests.
And it's interesting because we did start off with the pitch of like, if you participate in this, it will be very great for social science research. We did not take the angle of like, this will be great for you personally as you kind of speak. But that just happened organically as people did.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
These were over time. Should we?
Oh yeah, we are over time. You guys can talk to me personally without the setup.
Let's